Ang mahirap nito, Dick, is paano yung mga tao na tumanggap na lang sa PCR test ninyo na positive sila when all along negative sila, but because walang pera at hindi masyado di make an assertive ones, pasunod-sunod na lang, and had to endure a confinement of 2 weeks when all along tested negative pala sila. Yan ang problema mo sa Red Cross. Problema ka na, problema pa ang Red Cross sa iyo. Because of this information is accurate, then maybe the DOH must investigate this matter. You could be putting more people at risk. You could be falsely adding to the total positive cases per day of this country. Ilan yung nadagdag doon sa positive sa isang araw, daily attack, na negative, nasali na doon sa numero na pakarami na ang nasakit. Sure are we now in our figures in the veracity and truthfulness of the test combined? Marami man rin nagpunta dyan sa Red Cross. How do you backtrack? If it is impossible, what do you intend to do? Ang mahirap kasi niyan, sa panahon mo sa Red Cross, may audit 86,815,433.24 is attributed to you. Sabi ng COA, and in early August of this year, SBMA sent final demand for you to pay the said amount in 30 days. It has been more than 30 days, Mr. Gordon, and you have not done anything.
President Duterte lashes out at Senator Dick Gordon once again. This time, the president asks whether the senator diverted millions from his pork barrel funds to Red Cross. The president also questions the alleged false positive cases from PRC laboratories. And for that, the lower house wants to investigate the COVID-19 tests being conducted by Red Cross. Who's the richest and who's the poorest? The Senate releases a summary of the SALNs of the lawmakers in the upper house. President Duterte approves limited face-to-face classes in 120 schools. And today is exactly 49 years since former President Ferdinand Marcos declared martial law. Protest actions are set, while martial law survivors remember the dark times in Philippine history. Focused and fearless. Here's everything you need to know as you jumpstart your day. I'm Charles Lejano. President Rodrigo Duterte raised doubts over the Philippine Red Cross's testing capabilities after he allegedly received reports of many false positives from Red Cross labs. Recall that the government heavily relied on the PRC's testing facilities for most of the ongoing pandemic. As the Red Cross earlier noted, COVID testing covered 45% of the country's requirement at its height. But now Duterte is telling the health department to look into the alleged false positives in the tests conducted by the PRC.
Are your testing facilities and equipment really as good as you say they are? Because I have heard of many false positive cases from your laboratories. Can you enlighten the Filipino people on this?
President Duterte once again singled out PRC Chairman and Senator Richard Gordon. This in a bid to downplay the Senate's probe into the government's supposedly overpriced pandemic purchases.
Did I hear you correctly? Dick Are you saying that the government should have moved slower than we did? Hindi ko makuha ang takbo ng utak mo. Anong klaseng argument dito? There was a pandemic. Everything was supposed to act fast, promptly. And then, nandyan yan. The one which Congress passed was very explicit. Government can undertake negotiated biddings because the situation demanded it.
Alleged false positive results in some PRC labs are now also the subject of a House panel hearing. Marian Enriquez with the story.
The Philippine Red Cross is now being targeted in a House panel hearing. House Deputy Speaker Rodante Marcoleta raised an issue against the agency. He claimed that the agency's Subic lab yielded false positive RT-PCR tests for health workers. Health Secretary Francisco Duque confirmed the report. He said out of the 49 who tested positive in September 3, 44 came out negative in another test in a different laboratory 3 days after.
Which is being investigated now by the lab network headed by under Assistant Secretary Nestor Santiago, whom I believe has already relayed to the RITM to do an evaluation.
Cases like this, said Duque, is an outlier.
The percentage of positivity at about 89% is certainly out of the ordinary.
According to him, the government, through PhilHealth, has paid PRC 6 billion pesos for RT-PCR tests. For another lawmaker, Quezon's 2nd District Representative J.J. Suarez, the government should closely monitor testing laboratories as false positives may cause mental anguish.
Binabayaran naman natin yung pagtitest. So dapat ang makuha nating resulta ay yung totoo naman.
Duque said that they will still have to wait on the result of the investigation. They will submit the consolidated evaluation to be undertaken by the RITM. It will then be forwarded to the Health Facility Service Regulatory Bureau for determination and possible sanctions. The PRC, headed by Senator Richard Gordon, has yet to make a comment. Gordon has been the subject of President Duterte's ire. He heads the Senate Blue Ribbon panel probing government's purchase of alleged overpriced pandemic supplies. For News 5, Marian Enriquez, we are One News.
Health Secretary Francisco Duque III says the country's health system remains at high risk. In his report last night, Duque said that the increase in cases is slowing down in most regions and on a national scale. As such, Duque said the health department continues to urge hospitals and LGUs to beef up their critical care capacity and to ramp up vaccination among priority groups.
Masasabi natin na bumabagal na ang pagtaas ng ating mga kaso. Gayunman, nananatiling nasa high risk ang ating national case classification at healthcare utilization rate. Dahil dito, patuloy ang aming pag-udyok sa mga ospital at LGU na siguraduhin sapat ang bilang ng mga COVID-19 beds at mechanical ventilators.
Cynthia Villar is still the country's richest senator based on their 2020 SALNs. This as her net worth was logged at almost 4 billion pesos without any liabilities. Fighting Senator Manny Pacquiao is at number 2 with a net worth of about 3.2 billion pesos. And he is followed by Senate President Pro Tempore Ralph Recto with a 581 million peso net worth, Mig Zubiri with 220 million pesos, and Bong Revilla with almost 180 million pesos. Meanwhile, the poorest senators for 2020 include Joel Villanueva with a net worth of 33 million pesos, Kiko Pangilinan with about 24 million pesos, Bongo with 22 million pesos, Risa Ontiveros with 13 million pesos, and finally Senator Laila De Lima is still the country's poorest senator with a net worth of 9.5 million pesos last year. In other news, limited face-to-face classes will soon take place in the country. That's why as early as now, some schools are already gearing up in case they are among the 120 schools that will participate in the pilot run. Jenny Dawn with the story.
Pilot testing of face-to-face classes is finally a go. President Duterte has greenlit the limited trial, at least in areas deemed low risk for COVID-19. It will cover 100 public schools and 20 private schools handpicked by the Education and Health Departments.
Kailangan, numero uno, papasa sa safety assessment ng Department of Education ang lugar kung saan tayo mag-hold ng face-to-face classes. Kailangan pumayag ang local governments. Kailangan may written consent ng mga parents.
The pilot run will be held for half a day every other week. The number of participants will vary: 12 students for kindergarten, 16 for grades 1 to 3, and up to 20 for vocational classes. There will also be adjustments based on periodic risk assessments. Kapitbahayan Elementary School in Navotas has been preparing its modified classrooms just in case it gets selected. To date, Navotas has about 1,500 active cases.
Sinigurado natin na bawat desk ay nilagyan po natin ng barrier at ang bawat bata po ay mga may sanitation rin po silang dala.
School Principal Floreta Quijano said all of their teachers and staff have been fully vaccinated against COVID-19, but parents remain mixed over the possible return to traditional classes.
Minsan gusto ko nang pahintuin sa yung sa online, parang alam siyang masyadong natutunan nung...
Kami may pasok din sa trabaho. Hindi naman po pwede na tutukan namin sila kasi wala na po kami makain.
Okay naman po kahit magano kami mag-online class.
Bakit po?
Kasi parang mas ligtas yung mga anak namin sa virus.
Education Secretary Leonor Biones said blended learning would go on as usual. They are still awaiting the president's instruction as to when to commence the pilot run. This school year has sent 28 million enrollees, higher than last year's 26.2 million. For News 5, Jenny Dongon, we are One News.
Militant groups are set to flock the streets today for the commemoration of the 49th anniversary of the declaration of martial law. Aside from staging protests at Diwasang Bonifacio, as well as other parts of the country, some groups will also hold online protests on social media. Meanwhile, Akbayan youth called on the public not to vote for so-called junior dictators. And these include Davao City Mayor Sara Duterte and former Senator Bongbong Marcos.
Tiyakin natin na sa darating na taon, sa darating na mga panahon, hindi na makakabalik muli sa poder na kapangyarihan itong mga diktador sa pamamagitan ng kanilang mga junior, ng kanilang mga anak, ng mga junior dictators na ito para hindi na muling nakawan ang bansa.
So much.
Meanwhile, former Commission on Human Rights Chairperson Eta Rosales reminds us about the violence that Filipinos experienced during the Marcos' military rule. In an online forum of Isambayan youth, Rosales narrated how she was arrested, tortured, and violated by soldiers during that time. That's why she's also appealing to the youth to remain critical of candidates for the upcoming elections.
Mahalaga na ang kabataan magsalita. Magsalita tayo. Dahil sa kung nagsasalita ang mga kabataan at sinasabi nila, eto, alam ba ninyo na yung mga politiko, nakikinig yan eh. Nakikinig at pag naramdaman nila na ang lakas ng energies and reverberation through social media, kung ano man ang ginagawa ninyo, maintindihan nila na kayo, boboto kayo, hindi lang dun sa winnable, hindi lang dun sa main numbers, kung hindi yung merong track record, yung merong character, yung merong responsibilidad at may pananagutan more than anything else. Dahil ito ang kahulugan ng tungkulin sa pamahalaan.
And that's how the day is shaping up to be. Join us later at 10 a.m. as we monitor the day's biggest stories from sunrise to sundown. You can also catch One News on Signal Play. Just register for a free account at www.signalplay.com so you can stream One News live anytime, anywhere. I'm Charles Lejano. Mask on, wash hands, and stay safe, Philippines. We are One News.